Think about a moment when someone believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself. Maybe it was a coach, a teacher, a parent, a friend, someone who saw something in you and refused to let go even when you had. That feeling is hard to describe, but when you experience it, you never forget it. What if there was someone who believed in you like that? What if that someone still does? Would you want to know who it is and why they do? Let's find out together. For nearly 3 decades, a mother named Joyce Milgard walked into offices, courtrooms, newsrooms, and the halls of political power saying the same thing to anyone who would listen. My son is innocent. David Milgard had been convicted of the assault and murder of a nursing assistant in Saskatoon in 1969. He was only 16 years old. There was no physical evidence, and from the moment he was imprisoned in 1970, his mother never stopped. She sold her car, she sold her house, she dedicated every resource she had to one thing: getting her son out. People ignored her, some even ridiculed her. She lived on the edge of poverty, but she didn't stop. In 1992, after 23 years, David was finally released. And still she didn't stop. She kept fighting until 1997 when DNA evidence proved once and for all that her son was innocent. A journalist who wrote a book about her put it this way: "You could knock her down 1,000,000 times, but she would get up 1,000,001. That is a portrait of what Paul is describing when he says that love believes all things in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 7. It is not a love that gives up when things look bad. It's not a love that runs out of steam when everyone around you gave up a long time ago. It is the kind of love that even when every door has been closed and every voice has gone quiet, it still keeps showing up." Today, we are in the second episode of the series on 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 7, which says that love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. Last time, we looked at the first characteristic of love, that it bears all things. And we saw that love is like a roof. It covers, it protects, it does not expose your worst moments and walk away. It steps in and holds. Today we move to the second phrase. Love believes all things. And before we unpack what that means, I want to be clear about what it does not mean, because this is one of those phrases that can be easily misread and misunderstood. When Paul says love believes all things, he is not saying that love is somewhat naive. He is not saying that love should accept every claim as true, or that it should look past every red flag, or even pretend that facts don't exist. Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, addressed exactly that kind of thinking in the book of Proverbs. He wrote this: "Only simpletons believe everything they're told. The prudent carefully consider their steps." The love that believes all things is not foolish. It is not the kind of love that pretends hard things aren't hard and that broken things aren't broken. As a kid, I once believed that if you swallowed a watermelon seed, a watermelon would grow in your stomach. It's a bit foolish, right? I believed that because someone older than me said it. That's not wisdom, though. That's being gullible. That's not what Paul is talking about here, and that's important. So then what does it mean? Well, here's what I think Paul is getting at. The love that believes all things has the capacity to always hope for and expect the best in people, even when it has seen the worst. As human beings, we tend to go kind of the other direction, don't we? I mean, when someone has let us down once, maybe more than once, we quietly start assuming they will let us down again. We stop giving the benefit of the doubt, so to speak. We build up walls. We even label people. We close doors. And that instinct is not irrational. We have seen enough of people, including ourselves, to know that the track record is not perfect. But what Paul is describing is a love that refuses to let the worst moment get the final word. A love that does not rush into judgment, that does not assume bad intent, that holds space for the possibility of good, even in the middle of complicated circumstances. One Bible commentator puts it this way: love refers to a resilience in the face of setbacks and rejections that never gives up on people, whatever they do. That is a love that most of us have never fully experienced from another human being. And that is exactly the point. Because this kind of love is not ultimately something we can generate on our own. It has a source. When Paul says that love believes all things, he is describing how love responds when someone fails. Not just when things are unclear or maybe a little uncertain, but when the fault is there, it's confirmed, it's obvious. When the evidence is there, that is when love steps in. When there's no question what happened or what was intended, even then, the love that believes all things does not close the door. It doesn't quickly write off the person. It holds on to something that even failure can't cancel. And that's the power of redemption. The understanding that because of sin, all of us are broken and flawed by nature. That's important for us to understand. And rather than using that brokenness as a reason to walk away, this love adopts an attitude of mercy, an attitude of grace, an attitude of compassion. It trusts that people can change. It believes they deserve a second chance. That is a love most of us have rarely given and even more rarely received. And the reason it feels almost impossible is because on our own, it is. We cannot sustain that kind of belief in people without a source that is outside of ourselves, which is exactly why Paul is not describing a human achievement here. He is describing a divine one, a love that is only possible because it flows from somewhere that never runs out. Something that might surprise you is that Paul makes a point in his writings that most of us have never fully considered. The reality is that God's faith in you and me is far more important than our faith in him. Think about that for a moment. We spend a lot of energy worrying about whether our faith is strong enough, whether we believe hard enough, whether our doubts maybe disqualify us. But Paul is pointing to something that reframes all of that. Before you ever had a single thought about God, he had already decided what he believes about you. That's amazing. His faith in you is not a response to your faith in him. It is the foundation underneath all of it. It is what makes your faith possible in the first place. David expressed this when he wrote that even if people closest to him walked away, God would still hold him close. Not because David had earned it some way, not because his track record was clean, but because God's belief in us never depends on our performance. It's not based on how we're doing. It simply is. And that means on your worst day, when your own faith and hope feels like it has basically run out, His has not moved an inch. The love that believes all things is only really possible because God believes in us first. That's the foundation under all of this. God has never once, not even for a moment, stopped having faith in you. King David knew this. Listen to what he writes. He says, even if my father and mother abandon me, the Lord will hold me close. David's not talking about distant acquaintances or even distant relatives. He's talking about the people who are supposed to love him the most. And he is saying that even if they walk away, God will not. And then listen to what God says directly to us through the prophet Isaiah. I will be your God throughout your lifetime until your hair is white with age. I made you and I will care for you. I will carry you along and save you. That is not the language of a love with conditions. That is the language of love that has already decided. And here's the part that changes everything. God's faith in you and me is not just a feeling or a sentiment. It became a person. It took on skin and bone and flesh. It actually showed up in history because God fully believed in humanity, even in the middle of everything we had done and would do. Jesus Christ came. God didn't send an email or notice or someone else in his place. He came himself. He went to the cross. That is what believing in someone looks like. Think about what that first Easter weekend actually looked like from the inside. Not from where we sit today, knowing how the story ends, but from the inside, from people closest to him. The disciples have left everything to follow Jesus. Their careers, their families, their futures. They had basically reorganized their entire lives around the belief that Jesus was the one. And then Thursday night, he was arrested. Friday morning, he was tried. Friday afternoon, he was executed in the most humiliating way, nailed to a cross in public, stripped of everything and exposed. To every person standing there that Friday, it looked like it was over. Like faith had been misplaced. Like love had finally met something it could not bear. The dream was buried with Jesus in a sealed tomb, and a stone was rolled to the entrance. And still, God did not stop believing in humanity at the cross. In fact, the cross is the most extreme demonstration of what it looks like when love refuses to give up on someone. Jesus did not come down. He didn't walk away. He stayed under the full weight of every sin, every failure, every broken thing in every human life. And he did not move because he believed you were worth it. Because his faith in what was possible for you didn't waver even when the cost became everything. And then Sunday came. The resurrection of Jesus Christ is the definitive proof that love that believes all things cannot be buried, cannot be sealed behind a stone, cannot be defeated by death. Because of Easter, God's faith in you is not theoretical. It is historically verified. The tomb is empty. And the love that refused to give up on humanity is still refusing to give up on you. The cross is not just the story of someone dying. It is a story of God refusing to give up on us. Paul emphasizes this in his letter to the Romans, saying, now, most people would not be willing to die for an upright person, though someone might perhaps be willing to die for a person who is especially good. But God showed his great love for us by sending Christ to die for us while we were still sinners. Paul is emphasizing the fact that to give one's own life for someone else is not something you see every day. And I think if you and I were honest, there would be maybe a handful of situations or people we would be willing to give our life for. It really is the ultimate sacrifice. And the fact that Jesus died on the cross is a testament to how much God loved us. That he doesn't walk away when things get difficult. And that is a perfect picture of what a love that believes all things looks like. The author of Hebrews wrote that through his death, Jesus opened a new life-giving way, a way out of the story we are stuck in right now, a way into something entirely different. And the reason this matters today is because the voice in your head that says you have gone too far, that you have failed too many times, that you are basically a lost cause, that voice is lying. It is not speaking the language of the God who loves enough to believe all things. If you haven't seen the 2015 film McFarland USA, I think it's worth your time. It's based on a true story. Coach Jim White, played by Kevin Costner, and his family arrives in McFarland, California, one of the poorest towns in the state. The predominantly Latino farming community where most kids grew up expecting to spend their lives working in the fields. Nobody was looking at these kids and seeing any sort of potential. No one was expecting anything remarkable. But White noticed something. These boys, they could run. And more than that, he believed they could be champion runners. The problem was that nobody had ever believed that about them before, including themselves. He had to convince them one by one to even show up for practice. And when they did show up, he had to keep convincing them that they were worth the effort, that the dream wasn't ridiculous, that they weren't who the world had decided they were. And under his guidance, that team went on to win the state championship in 1987 and eventually 9 state titles over the next 14 years. Every member of that first team became the first in their family to go to college or into military service. None of that happened without a coach who believed in them before they even believed in themselves. That image, a man walking into a room full of kids the world had basically written off and refusing to see what everyone else saw. That is not just a great sports story. It's a picture of exactly what we have been talking about today, because you have someone who has done that for you. Not with a training program or a state championship, but with something that cost infinitely more. The cross of Christ is God walking into the worst version of our story and refusing to see us the way the world does, or even sometimes the way we see ourselves. And the difference between Coach White's story and the Easter story is that what God did in Jesus didn't just change a group of kids. It changed the story of what death, love, and resurrection can do. Before we end, I want to give you 3 questions to think about, like last time. The first one is this. Is there a narrative you are carrying about yourself? A story you have told yourself about who you are and what you're capable of that is not actually coming from God? A lot of us have internalized voices that say we are far too gone, we're too broken, too much of a failure to believe in. And maybe those voices came from a parent, a relationship, a moment of failure you have never fully recovered from. The author of Hebrews wrote that through his death, Jesus opened a new way, a new life-giving way, a way out of the story we were stuck in. And that includes the story you have been telling yourself. The question is not whether God still believes in you. He does. The question is whether you are willing to believe that. Where did that story come from? And does it match what you just heard today? The second question is this. Is there someone in your life that you have quietly stopped believing in? Someone whose situation has been difficult for a long time, and you have started to just simply pull back. Not necessarily in a dramatic way, just a slow withdrawal of faith in what is possible for that person. The love that believes all things does not require you to be naive about the facts. It requires you to trust that God is still at work. That the last chapter has not been written for this person. That your role right now might simply be to stay in the room and refuse to agree with the worst case version of their story. And so what would it look like this week to offer one person in your life the benefit of the doubt they may not feel they deserve? And finally, the third question is this. What would change in your life if you actually believed, not just as a theological idea, but as something real and personal, that God has never stopped having faith in you? Not the version of you that has it together, the real version, the one that knows exactly where you have fallen short. What would you stop hiding? What would you stop running from? How would you live differently if you were convinced that the God who walked out of a sealed tomb on Easter Sunday has not changed his mind about you? Process that question over the next couple of days, because the love that believes all things is not waiting for you to clean up yourself first. It is already decided. The cross is the proof, and the empty tomb is the guarantee.
Jesus walked the road of sacrifice, carried our fears, carried all our fights. No crown of gold upon his head, but love remained steadfast and pure. Jesus on the cross, you made a way for us. Our hope was born because of you. By your wounds we now are free. We have hope through Calvary. We will cherish the old rugged cross. At the cross on earth where laid what was broken found release, chains undone because of him. From his hands forgiveness flows. Hope secure forevermore. Jesus on the cross, you made a way for us. Our hope was
You are not a lost cause. I know that might be hard to hear or hard to believe depending on where you are right now. But the God who stretched out his arms on a cross did not do that for people who had it all together. He did it for people who didn't. He did it because he believed that humanity was worth it. And that includes you. That includes the version of you that you are almost ashamed to admit. That includes the part of your story that you haven't told anyone. God knows it, and he has not changed his mind about you. That is relentless love. It has never once looked at you and decided you weren't worth believing in. I say that knowing some of you are watching right now and you're not sure what to do with any of this. Maybe you have heard about God before and it didn't really stick with you. Maybe the love you have experienced has left you skeptical that any true love actually lasts. And I understand that. But I want you to know that what we are talking about in this series is not a theory. It's a person. And that person has been holding faith in you longer than you have been alive. If you'd like to go deeper in what we covered today, I invite you to visit hopestudy.ca. But if something spoke to you today and you'd like to respond, you can. You can just simply say, Jesus, I want to know this love. That's enough. He will hear you. Can I pray for you? Father, thank you for the fact that you believe in us. And you went to the cross because of that belief. For everyone watching right now, whoever is carrying the weight of feeling like they're not worth believing in, would you please remind them today of who you are and what you have already done. You have never stopped having faith in them. Help them to receive that. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you so much for joining me today. I will see you on the next episode. I have a great resource I'd like to send to you. Today's free book is called Earth's Final Pulse. If you ever wondered what Jesus said about the end of the world, this book will answer many of your questions. All you have to do is let me know where to send it by following the link on your screen. Also, if you'd like to support Hope Channel Canada financially, I invite you to visit agentsofhope.ca. And thank you for helping us continue to change lives.